This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
War Eagle Auburn fans, welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion, part of the E2C Network. I'm AJ Richardson. I'm also here with my buddy, Jared Davis. Jared, we suffered through another loss. This is seeming to be a big theme of this season, going up against good opponents, struggling mightily, at times not even feeling like we had a chance. And this was another one of them. And it just hurts. I mean, but at the same time, I'm almost used to it now. So maybe I'm used to the hurt. Are you?
You could probably just record the first part of this about us losing like just one time and just replay that, because yeah, it's becoming a trend. It's not becoming, it is a trend.
Yeah.
It's bad.
And I feel like the worst part is I'm getting almost numb to it. Like I'm expecting it. Like I had zero faith that we would win this game.
Yeah, I think in anything in life, worse than anger is apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you reach that stage where you just don't care, that's not a good thing. At least when somebody's angry, that means they care.
Yeah. I mean, there was maybe a couple of times in the game where I got a little angry. You know, like something bad happens. We had 10 penalties and 7 of them were on the offensive line. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I know Georgia's defensive front is really tough, but like 7 penalties, like just basic things like that you're just like, that angers me. And then I was like, well, that's who we are. I mean, we're 6 games in, we're halfway through the season, which is crazy still. Like we're halfway through now. And yeah, this is just who we are. We're 3-3, and but yeah, it's going to be a struggle. I mean, Jared, do you think right now we get bowl eligible? Do you see a way to that?
Yeah, I see a way, and it's more to do with how bad other teams. There's a lot of bad teams in the SEC right now. I don't think people are really even realizing how bad Arkansas is right now, especially without their quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense is like one of the worst in the country, and it's at home. A&M is bad. I know A&M almost beat Alabama, but we can't forget they also lost to App State and got blown out by Mississippi State. They're just not a good football team. And then you got Western Kentucky. So, here's the thing. I could see us losing all 3 of those, Western Kentucky included, because if we put out, like, we can't run an offense. And you have to score to win a game. So, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to give any of them guaranteed wins, but I could see us winning those 3 because they're at home.
Yeah.
But I don't know with the current staff in place if we do.
So let's get into that, because that's I think on the top of everybody's mind. Coaching. First off, we had, remember, Alan Green hired Harsin, and we also fired Gus. Pretty in that same few months, and Alan Green said, "Hey, this is our guy. Let's go forward with him." Now we're 17 or so games in to the season, or into Harsin's era in Auburn football. I mean, it feels like that was the wrong hire. Am I wrong? Or is there?
You are not wrong, sir. And listen, I'm somebody that supported him, just from the standpoint of look, I try to go on facts, right? He was the 3rd winningest coach in college football at the time. He came from a program that utilized probably lesser talent, and obviously we're never going to get what Georgia and Alabama get, not why Saban and Kirby are there. So can he utilize 4 stars and find some 3-star diamonds in the rough, which we probably did with Jarquez Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
They've done a little bit of that. So there was some things there to like. But I was talking today, I got another group of buddies that I'm with, and I'm like, the one thing that you absolutely cannot miss on, and I feel like this would be very easy to figure out with due diligence, is how does he handle recruiting?
Mm-hmm.
And Harsin, I'm not saying Harsin doesn't care about recruiting, but Harsin is not putting in anywhere near the effort that Saban and Kirby are, and they don't even have to anymore.
Yeah.
So the new kid on the block is acting like he doesn't have to do what they're doing.
Right. Well, I was listening to, I think maybe it was another podcast or like college football podcast, and they were talking about how, and it hit me, like the first couple years, even your first year of recruiting, is a good indication of how good of a recruiter you are. Now, I know he kind of came into this, not even having a full cycle in the second year. Yeah, that's kind of what you're going to expect in this, statistically, that's what you're going to get with Harsin. And that's, especially for Auburn, with the amount of money we have that flows into our program and the notoriety. I mean, for goodness sakes, literally, 9 years ago, we were in the national championship game. It's not that far removed. And then even 2017 had a chance if only we could beat Georgia in the SEC championship. So it's not like we're that far off. We're a lot closer to, the championship level, which when recruits see that, they're like, yeah, like I'll give you some, more attention with coming to your school because, hey, guess what? I want to win a national championship. I want to go pro. Those are the things that are going through in a recruit's head. So Harsin already had a pretty good hand that, dealt to him just coming to Auburn, and we're not getting that kind of standard of recruiting. Is that off base, or is that
no
makes sense?
I think it should be rare occasion for Auburn to be outside the top 15 in recruiting.
I agree.
Because of the history, because of the location mostly. We're a top 15 program historically, overall. We're in a bubble, right? All we see is Georgia and Alabama, and we think everybody's being successful. That's not the case. Like, there's Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia's just starting to get there. We'll see if it continues. And Alabama are the ones over the last 10 years that have been super successfully consistent. Everybody else has gone through coaching changes. They're trying to find themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's in the same boat. The problem is, I think what really is the problem with Auburn, because I really don't think we're a ton more dysfunctional than other schools, but we are not. We are the little brother in Alabama, and the media is controlled by Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you get fed a story long enough, you start believing it, right?
Right.
And so I think that we start thinking, well, who's going to come to Auburn?
Yeah.
But I talk to buddies who are not from the South, and they're like, dude, I want to go to an Auburn game. I hear the atmosphere is amazing. Y'all are awesome. You always give Alabama a game. Y'all are the only ones that can do it. Like, there's good vibes about Auburn on a national level.
Yeah.
Historically.
No, I think you make a good point. Like, I just think back to like some of the top articles that you see about Auburn that tend to come up, and I'm thinking about like an AL.com kind of article, and some of those are, it seems like very bent towards Auburn is the little brother and Alabama is the big brother. So we're going to, show a light on Auburn and its dysfunction, when in reality, I mean, just look no further than schools like Tennessee, and they're way more dysfunctional than us. Now they're having success this year, but they went through how many coaches in a span of like a year? 3, I think it was. It was crazy.
AJ, Alabama did the exact same thing before they hired Saban. They were in the exact same boat. Miami last year, hired an athletic director and a coach before they had fired those people at that position at the school, and it was barely mentioned. Can you imagine if Auburn hired a new coach while they still had a coach?
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, that's essentially what they did.
Yeah.
And it was a very small story. If that happened at Auburn, you'd be like, that's Auburn being Auburn. That's what Auburn does.
No, you make a good point.
And I do think I don't think everybody's on the same page. And I do think some people that donate money want more input than their money should probably give that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not professional football coaches. However, I think it goes on everywhere. And I think we've been jaded into thinking it's only at Auburn. Who would come here?
Yeah.
And it becomes a mentality. And I think that even the people making the decisions, that becomes a mentality. And so they're like, well, let's just get Kevin Steele. You're like, no, you got to go get I'm not saying splash in the sense that it looks cool. I'm saying get a splash in the sense the person can get the job done.
Right. No, you make a good point. And there's a lot that I think, us as fans, we don't see. And then we see the outcomes of it. And we just start, we see, oh, hey, Gus got fired. And some people thought, hey, that was too soon. I mean, there was a trail of, stuff that Gus had done that was, it just factually bad for the program. And so, then we see the outcome of like, oh wait, I'm a Gus fan. I like Gus and whatever. I'm looking back at things. 2020 vision, right? And Harsin is kind of in this. Hey, we're in the middle of this. Where he's not doing well. I mean, one of the craziest stats that I saw on him was what is this? Oh yeah, in the last 8 Power 5 games, he's only won 1, and that was Missouri. And you look at that and you're like, wow, that's not a good look, especially when Auburn has arguably more talent than a lot of these Power 5 teams that they're facing. So that's the hard part for me. And
AJ, let's make it even worse. What's the one game? What had to happen for that one game that we're 1-7?
I mean, literally the other team gave it away twice.
Yeah, like 4. Like missed picks, missed field goal, fumbled the ball, jumped off sides on our like 4 things had to go wrong in the last 4 minutes of the game.
Yeah,
and that's the one win he has.
Yeah, and I mean that's hard because even thinking back to the Iron Bowl last year, what if we had won that one? Do you think he would have been as much of hot water as he is now?
No, and here's the bad thing. I don't know why. Maybe it happens at every school. I'm gonna circle back around, but it happened with Gus. Gus's offense was never the same after we had I call it the butt fumble against A&M in 2014 when we were driving down to win. It never got back on track. Last year, Mississippi State, and I know Bo went down, but even that game was slipping away. There was nothing we can do, and it never got back on track for Harsin. I mean, we went from being 28-3 over Mississippi State. Think about if we win that game, Bo stays healthy. We beat South Carolina without a doubt. We beat Alabama. Recruiting's better. Bo's still here. It's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't let one game destroy your career, and that's essentially what happened. We have not gotten back from that.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
No, I don't either. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess this gets us to the big question. I mean, Harsin being fired. Should it? I think almost everybody that I've talked to, I feel like there's a handful of people that are holding on hope. I think there's a chance that he can stay and just give him time. Give him time. And I'm like, I don't think there's any coming back from this. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? Getting fired midseason, end of season, or not at all this year?
Yeah, I want to talk in a more professional. I mean, when I'm in the heat of the moment, I'm like, yeah, fire him. I do think we have to move on, but I do want to make the point these are people's lives, and it's going to affect. Harsin will be very wealthy after this. The assistant coaches not so much. They'll be okay, but there's a lot of people affected by this, so I don't want it to be like, hey, it's just get rid of him, no big deal, let's move on. I realize it's a big deal, okay? But in everything in life, you don't make decisions in a vacuum, right? This isn't about Harsin directly. This is about, okay, if we don't do this, consequences are what happens to Auburn. Mm-hmm. And so you got to think about that. And I think at the end of the day, it did not work. The experiment didn't work. And, we can hang on for another year, but then we're that much further behind in recruiting. AJ, I've said this, I think, on every podcast we've done where we talked about it. If he was even number 15 right now in recruiting, as much as it would hurt me to watch what happened Saturday and say, yeah, let's give him I would still probably be like, hey, let's give him a shot. If we had some O-line commits, big time, we didn't have a quarterback for 2023. If we had a quarterback commit, we had some positive vibes, okay, let's give it one more year. We have none of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's literally nothing Harsin can point at and say, I mean, he brought us white face mask and orange face mask, and they look really cool.
But also, how much was that, in the works already, and Gus was just like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. Did he just say, approve this? Is that it?
Yeah, and it may not even be him that did it. But, that's the only thing. You're in your performance review. What have you done good? Well, I mean, our white face masks look really good with our white uniforms.
Yeah.
I think that's not going to cut it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess kind of let's circle back to that conversation of does it need to happen middle of the year? And if so, what does that look like? Or just wait until the end?
I think it. So I would typically be okay with waiting till the end of the year. I think he is actually hurting the team in game, and I don't know if it's because he knows it's happening, so he doesn't care. He went for it on 4th and 10.
Yep.
Against LSU, which directly resulted in LSU driving down and scoring.
Right.
He went
and,
for
and it was in a bad field position to do
terrible field position. He went for a fake punt against Georgia.
Yep.
That directly resulted. AJ, I don't think I'm over exaggerating here. If we don't do that fake punt, I could argue we probably go into halftime 0-0.
Yeah, or at worst 0-7.
7-0 at worst. Everything plays out different if we don't do that fake punt. So I highly doubt the exact same punt and then punt return that led to their other 7 happens, right? It's probably a different.
Yeah.
The whole thing's different.
Yeah.
You can make the argument we go in 0-0.
I mean, I feel like that deflates your team because you're like, okay, awesome, we're going to go for it. And like it just is a complete flop. And guess what? Georgia is ready to go and they got their offense going, score a touchdown. And you're like, well, crap. Like this was about to be, honestly, I was kind of anticipating a little bit of a punting battle back and forth, a field position back and forth before a team would score. And that kind of kick-started things with touchdowns and actual scoring.
Yes. And so back to your question, I think he's hurting the team. Like I don't think you can even make the argument that this is better for the team to him to remain the coach. I think he's being reckless with his play calling on the field that is putting the team in a worse spot.
Mm.
And so that is why I think you need to make the decision.
Yeah. No, I think I'm coming around to that idea because, again, I'm the same mindset. I would probably prefer, in most scenarios, let it play out. We'll finish the season and just, move on after literally Iron Bowl. Sunday morning, give them a call, or for goodness sake, Saturday night, give them a call and say, you're done, get out. But that doesn't seem, I mean, like, honestly, I think our team, and again, like you and I think, and most Auburn fans are, what is best for this team? And I think Auburn's going to win more games without Harsin. And that's hard to say for me. Because, again, I was on the boat of Harsin. I thought he was a pretty good pick on paper, right? Seemed like he could figure it out. We had issues with quarterbacks. So what did we do? We hired a quarterbacks coach. That's Harsin. He's, helped Kellen Mond and like all these great quarterbacks. And this is where we're at. An ineffective offense that can't do anything when we're having to rely on our defense, and our defense over time is just going to wear out.
Did you realize, and you may have this where you're going to get to it. So let's say we did we had to put an interim coach. Somebody like Zach Etheridge, we've given up 2 passing touchdowns all year. From the halftime of LSU to halftime of Georgia, we had given up 40 passing yards, an entire 4 quarters.
That's pretty freaking good.
We're like ranked 35th nationally in the secondary overall. We've given up 2 touchdowns. Like, put somebody like that in charge, defensive minded, play field position. None of it's going to be pretty. We've talked about this. We're going to have to win ugly games, right? You're not going to win ugly games against Georgia. You're not going to win ugly games against Alabama. But everybody else in the SEC is kind of beatable right now. Not Tennessee, but we don't play them. Everybody else on our record.
Yeah.
Even Ole Miss struggled with Vanderbilt, and really Kentucky gave them 5 turnovers 2 weeks ago. So, I don't think that there's anybody on that schedule where you're like, hey, if we don't play sound defense and field position, we still can't even win. I think almost everybody on the schedule you could. But you can't. It was a turnover. What do we preach? Turnovers. You can tell you got me heated. We turned the ball over on purpose ourselves at their 30-yard line.
Right. That is a turnover. And guess what? That is on the coaches. Like
100%.
We had so many issues with, the game before, fumbling the ball and all that. Really only one, turnover that was just on Robbie, whatever. But everything, that, punt that we could have potentially punted, and for goodness sakes, Oscar Chapman is having a year. And that, flipping the field, putting them on their, 25, 30-yard line, that changes the game. I feel like that changes it.
And I'm going to move on from the fake punt after this, but let me ask you a question. What had you done up to that point that made you think if we get this first down on the fake punt, we're going to actually continue on and not be punting 3 plays from now?
That's a good question, right?
What had he done that made you think that?
I mean, I didn't see anything. I mean, at that point, I was like, I literally looked at my wife and I was like, we're done. Like, if we're resorting to this already, we're done. Like, I know you have to pull out some crazy plays against Georgia to beat them, but that's not the scenario to do it. a scenario where you do a fake punt is you're on, Georgia's side of the field, and you're kind of in that weird zone of like, do you like punt it or run a play? Like that's what you do. You run a fake punt there.
Right, because it might get you into field goal range.
Right.
Get some form of points. Let's say we get that. We're now at their 40.
Yeah.
And we have not moved the ball at all.
Right. Well, and I don't know what Robbie's stats were at that point, but I mean, Robbie, he's a new quarterback. And like at one point he was 3 of 13 for passing.
Yeah. Probably that point.
Yeah, probably around that point, honestly.
And we're running a fake punt to put it back in his hands.
Yeah. And so it's like, are you setting your team up for success? I mean, that's the key of a coach, right? Setting their players up to do their best, most capable thing. And yet you're putting your defense back on the field in a hard situation where, guess what? Georgia's feeling the momentum. It's in Athens. Bad decision. Very bad decision.
Yeah, I mean, if we knew this was not going to be a 7-point game, but let's say it would have been. Let's say we were good enough on offense that would have cost us the game. I mean, that would have been the difference.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy is, like you said, if we take that fake punt out of things, we would have been at halftime like within a score or two of them, and that's really honestly not that bad. I think we could have come out with a couple great plays and motivated our defense enough to stand tall, and of course that didn't play out the way it did.
Well, let's say worst case it's 7-0. Let's give them the other punt return, good punt return. 7-0. You go into half. Wasn't it their first drive coming out that we created the fumble?
Yeah.
And I know that we struggle, right? So I'm not saying but if everybody's morale was up, so we got the fumble, but it's still 14-0, and everybody's like, okay, so it wasn't like momentum shifted. If it's 7-0 and you get that fumble, that's a little different feeling in that stadium.
Mm-hmm. No, it really is. And you probably have the home field fans not as, loud and, doing their thing. Yeah.
You just don't know what happens there. Maybe they tense up a little more. Maybe they miss a tackle and we score a touchdown instead. You know what I'm saying? You just don't know. Anyways, okay, I'm done with the fake punt.
All right. So let's also talk about some other items here. Let's talk about penalties for a second. I mean, penalties, it's just the self-inflicted penalties that our team had. 10 over the whole game. In the first half alone, we had 8. And of those penalties, again, like I mentioned, 7 of them were offensive line, just dumb mistakes. I know our offensive line has been battered. We're on to our, third, maybe fourth string center at this point. And that's just kind of where we're at. And I know they're having to go up against Georgia's defensive front. But, is there any, to me, even a false start, that's just a mental error. And, holding, maybe just the guy beat you. You didn't want to, allow them to sack your quarterback. I get that one a little bit more. But sometimes these false starts just put you, first and 15. And then, guess what? You're just putting yourself in a bad situation. It's not going to help you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the data, but it feels like a trend now where we're not real. I know we may have had one game where we were pretty good, cleaned it up a little bit, but I feel like we're continuing to hurt ourselves. And that's coaching. That's not in-game coaching. Yeah. That is having your team mentally prepared. And, I mean, there were many times we got it to 2nd and 1, and there'd be a penalty, and it'd be back to, third or second and, 8 or whatnot. And it's like, okay, that's a whole different, or even, we'd have a run and it'd be 2nd 5, but there was holding. So, 2nd and 15, stuff like that. Like that, you can't do that. Yeah. I mean, you cannot do that against anybody, but definitely not Georgia.
Definitely not Georgia. And that's where I immediately felt this sinking feeling because, when the, fake punt happened, I was like, we're not doing anything. And because we kept, penalizing ourselves super early. And maybe there is some credit to, the fans there, but that many, I feel like you should figure that part out. That, the fans shouldn't cause you to have that many penalties in a game where you have to be clean to even be in competition with them, and you're not.
Well, yeah, and I know that we have a new center and stuff, but the talk all off season was, okay, yes, our offensive linemen are not great, but they've all been here a long time.
Yeah.
And so they can probably get better. like I don't know. Some of these may not be 4-year starters, but a lot of them have been around the program a very long time. They've been to atmospheres like Georgia.
Yeah.
That should not be. Yeah, you just can't. Not that many. You're gonna have one or two. Okay, you're gonna have one or two penalties. I mean, it's just that happens in a game. You can't have that many.
Yeah.
And it always is at a very. I just can't. I feel like there was like 3 times where we would have probably wound up getting a first down because we had a decent play and the penalty, and then boom, drives over.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's, again, like, to me, that's the coaching staff preparing their players.
Absolutely.
If they're not doing that, then what are we doing here? So again, comes back to our original discussion about Harsin. I think it's time to move on, and I think it's time to move on sooner rather than later. Now, whether or not Auburn's going to do that, I keep hearing rumblings that they're gonna wait until the end of the year, but I also think especially when it comes to, think about this. At the end of the season, a bowl game is not only important for, going somewhere and playing an extra game, but it's so much more crucial for practices. And if we have a legit fighting chance, in my mind, to make a bowl, we have to make some big change. And if that's Harsin, getting fired, and we get an interim head coach, maybe that's the change that's needed. So, let's talk about some positive stuff, because, we're obviously, a lot of us Auburn fans are pretty, angsty and angry with all of the, on the field stuff. But let's talk about some of the positive stuff that did happen. So, we still had Tank and Jarquez, and for goodness sakes, Jarquez's touchdown, like, that was a great move, because he had 3 Georgia guys right around him and did a little spin move. Kind of honestly reminded me of Kerryon Johnson, like doing some spin moves, getting out of some tackles. It reminded me a lot of that, and breaking out and scoring that long touchdown. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we know our running backs are capable of, and I feel like we haven't gotten to see that. And again, that's to me, that's on the coaching staff, because I think both Tank and Jarquez are not in a spot where we've seen them succeed as much as what we've hoped. I mean, commentators keep saying, like, Tank's one of the best, if not the best, running back in the SEC. You look at his stats; they don't show that. Probably mostly because of offensive line, but there's also coaching that goes into that. Tank still isn't getting the ball enough. I mean, he's like 10 to 12 times a game. For a guy like Tank, we should be riding him a little bit more than that, in my opinion. What's kind of your thoughts on the running back and like that situation? Because both running backs are super capable for us.
Yeah, real quick, funny note. My kids they're getting more into the games, and so I said, all right, I got to do my podcast tonight. What's some positive, since you're on the positive? I said, what's some positive things we can talk about? And my oldest said, well, talk about Jarquez Hunter. He played well. And my youngest said, talk about McDonald's bringing back the boo bucket. McDonald's is doing the Halloween buckets that your Happy Meal comes in, but you can use them for trick or treating. So that's where his mindset is. So boo
that's
buckets,
awesome.
That's a positive thing. If anybody's listening, those are coming back. Totally off subject. As far as running back goes, I have quietly thought this for a while, and I've been afraid to say it out loud. And I don't know that the measurables at a combine, if this will be true, but I think Jarquez is a better running back for our offense.
Mm-hmm.
And
it seems like it.
Yeah, I couldn't care less. Like, I would say Tank because he's been here longer. Like, I don't ever care who's doing well. I'm just truly watching, and I'm like, man, it sure does feel like the offense does better when Jarquez is in there. And the play that he made, I mean, he's just hard to bring down. He's a bigger body, hard to bring down, very agile. And hey, we scored. Was that in the fourth quarter? We scored a touchdown.
Yeah, so guess what? We scored points in the second half.
You think Harsin brought that up in his review with the athletic director? If they do one every week, he's like, "Hey, you told me to score in the second half. I did." But yeah, I think running back wise, we're not utilizing them enough. Tank's not getting used enough. Jarquez is not getting used. You got to get the ball to your best players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how you do that.
Yeah. And there's a couple times I feel like a game they go to the running back pass, but that's not enough. Like, only a couple times getting your best playmaker the ball in open field, that's not enough. I mean, and again, that kind of comes back to me coaching, scheming things open, getting your players in the right positions, and it's just not happening.
I don't. It looks way more simple than it is. But when I watch Alabama, even forever, really, even when the Sarkisian was like putting up tons of numbers, a lot of their passes were at the line of scrimmage or behind. It was a well-thrown ball. Yeah, it was a well-thrown ball, even in the flat to the running back, in rhythm, great blocking downfield, and it looks simple, and we just make everything look hard, and we don't do. I will say this: I think Robbie does. You either have it or you don't. I do think on the slants, Robbie hits people in stride. I think we need to utilize that more. He misses other things, but that pass is a lot of times thrown in the guy can't have to reach for it. It's got to be in rhythm, and while he's going forward, I think Robbie does that well. I think there's something we can look at and make that happen more on the screens out wide and dropping to the running back in the flat. You got to get him the ball. You got to get him the ball.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do it, but it's got to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is kind of showing you literally our regular wide receivers besides, Jarquez and John Samuel Schenker, who's a tight end. We only had 20 yards for Javarius. Capers had 16. Coy Moore had 14. Like that for your wide receiver core is not acceptable. For guys like John, so thankful we have John Samuel Schenker, because without him, we would probably have only like 100 yards passing this game.
I never played football, so I realize you got to have the players, right? It seems like you have the advantage on offense. Even if you don't have a great O-line, you can dial up quick. How do you not get players open? I guess is my ultimate question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a coach either, but I did play some football. And, offense has the advantage because they know what's coming. They know the play. The defense is very reactionary of what does the player on the other side of the ball do? What does the wide receiver do? What does the running back do? And they react based off of that. So if you can, again, that comes back to coaching, scheme the guy open to make them think you're doing one thing when you're doing another. And that's when the success and the open passes and all of that happen.
I just don't understand how you cannot get, when they are not legally supposed to be able to touch you, and you are a Power 5 athlete, and you know the route, how we cannot get more guys open.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, the rules are built for you to get guys open.
Right.
And we can't do it.
Right. So, and that's the weird part. Like, I feel like, bringing in a new wide receiver coach, we were just like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I remember preseason even thinking, wow, you look at these wide receivers this year, we're in a better spot. And not even this year or this game, I think even last game, like, Shedrick Jackson is kind of fallen off. Like, is he quitting? Like, is he quitting on the team? Or is it just like these younger guys are rising up and passing him, a guy who's been here so long? And it's like, this is, the wide receiver room is such a weird hodgepodge of different players.
You got. I will give I kill you this. So we've dropped way fewer passes this year.
Yes.
So I do think there's improvement there. You got to have a go-to guy. I mean, you had, when I was in college or even like 20, whatever, in the past years, you had Darvin Adams. You had Slayton. You had who was the guy that would go up and catch any? He was a deep threat guy in Gus 2013, I think. I can't think of his name.
Sammy Coates.
Sammy Coates.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had guys like that. You had in 2004 the guy that caught the ball in the end zone against LSU just sealed that game. I had a class with him actually. I can't think of his name, but you had guys that you could rely on when it was 3rd and 4. I'm going to him. He's going to be open, and it's going to be a first down.
Yeah.
We don't have that guy. I don't know where we're going on 3rd and 4. Probably backward. I don't know what you gotta have go-to players.
Yeah.
I think we do at running back. I think JJ can be that at receiver, but I mean his first catch was like the 3rd quarter, and it was a heck of a throw by Robbie. Robbie was backpedaling.
Oh yeah.
Throws it before JJ breaks his route. That's the stuff you watch Robbie do, and you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then you watch him do the simple stuff or not do the simple. I mean, AJ, I'm going to tell you, man, I think he scores if he doesn't fumble that ball, and I think he saw it. Because if you get that behind-the-scene view, there was nobody.
Yeah. Either that or he breaks a 30, 40-yard run. And, I kept telling my wife, watching the game, I was like, you get somebody like Robbie, kind of reminds me of Bo. When you get him running and he's successful at running, that opens up the whole playbook because he can, he's feeling it. He's in a zone, and that's when your offense gets clicking. And I agree. Like when he fumbled it, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, I mean, the game was pretty much already in hand, but like that for sure was the final nail in the coffin before the final whistle.
Well, and it hurt seeing the fumble from the side, and then when they showed from behind, I'm like, there's nobody. It looked like Stetson Bennett's run where nobody was there.
Right.
The middle of the field was wide open, and Robbie's way faster than Stetson. So, it would have been a nice play.
Yeah. And it's really, again, frustrating because we've seen the explosive plays that Robbie can do while running the ball, and yet he's had so many fumbles this year. I mean, I think he has the most. I saw a stat. I think he has the most fumbles of any one player in college football.
I think he's I think it was the Bo. I think Bo tried to do too much. I think Bo knew he had to try to do too much, and I think Robbie might be doing the same thing. They're trying too hard because nothing else is working.
Yeah. I mean, if I was in their position too, I'd be like, hey, I played within the system for half a game and it wasn't working. We got 0 points on the scoreboard. I got to make something happen.
I'm not blaming them. And we saw at LSU last year that sometimes that works, right?
Yeah.
It can't be your offensive formula, though. I think it's being proven that can't be what you rely on to just kind of make something happen. Because more times than not, it winds up turning into something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not Robbie's fault. I'm not blaming Robbie. I'm not blaming Bo. I think that, though, they would get too ahead of themselves because they were trying to make something happen because they had to. And that all comes back to we haven't had a good O-line for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about defense and the special teams, wrap things up real quick. A couple of players really stood out to me. First off, Donovan Kaufman. He had quite a game. Had 7 tackles. I mean, the dude was everywhere. And, I mean, he had to be. And that's what he did. He put a lot of pressure on the wide receivers. He made tackles when he needed to. He almost even had an interception. And he actually got graded the highest defensive back for Auburn on Pro Football Focus. And rightly so, because he was doing his job. Another guy, DJ James from the secondary, he also played pretty darn well, had 4 tackles. And one of the things that, I keep watching DJ James because I think he has one of the highest ceilings of any of our secondary players. And there was one play he tripped. If Stetson doesn't throw the ball way over his wide receiver's head, it's probably a touchdown for Georgia. And I also thought it was kind of interesting. I was talking to a couple of Georgia fans today, and they were just talking about, Stetson used to be the touch deep ball kind of guy, and that's not happening this year for him nearly as much as he's hoped. So, yeah, I don't know what that is, if that's, teams figuring him out, but, that I think that, also is a part of defensive backs, putting, keeping tight pressure on wide receivers. Also, Colby Wooden, that strip sack, that was amazing. To get a strip sack when, Georgia, we needed that at that moment in the game, and we made it happen. So, props to them for, turning that over. And, if you look at the turnover battle, we were even 1-1 this game. So I guess that's improvement, right? Kind of. So.
Yeah, I mean, I won't bring back up the fake punt technically being a turnover. I guess I just did bring it up, but yeah, I mean the actual turnover. Yeah, we were tied.
Yeah. One other player, Derek Hall. Towards the end of the game, it looked like he came off the field a little injured. He kind of came on to one of the plays kind of slow, and he actually got called for being offsides. And then literally right after that, he went off the field. Which, what's crazy is we pretty much have like 3 guys at edge, maybe 2, really 2 at this point. If Derek Hall, it seems like he's coming back, but only really 2 guys at edge that are on scholarship. That we knew it was going to be a weak area, but now not having Eku and now Derek Hall being injured, that's pretty crazy to me. So it's a rough spot. It's a rough spot to be at. I've already mentioned on special teams, Oscar Chapman doing his job, but he was doing everything and that he could to do his job and put us in a position to win. He had an average again around 44.7 yards per punt. He had 9 punts. Like if you, it was funny. The game program, like the digital one that Auburn sends out, was featuring Oscar Chapman before this game, and my dad was like, "We're featuring the punter for the Georgia game. This is not good." And I was like, well, he's about to have a game. And sure enough, he did. So, good for him. He even had a long 56. So, I mean, he's doing his job out there. So, hey, and also, Honors. Honors made a 30-yarder. So,
yeah, he did.
I love that. Maybe give him some more confidence. I mean, if you look at his stats for this year, you forget about the 3 field goals essentially he missed in the game, and then get some extras just because of penalties. I mean, this year he's not doing half bad. He's at 75% field goal percentage right now.
Yeah,
as much as we hate on him.
Yeah, I think there's been 2 or 3 offsides that don't reflect in the numbers. But again, offsides, maybe that throws your timing off. He sees that offsides, and who knows. So, but I mean, overall his numbers are not terrible.
Yeah. All right, so I know we've talked a lot. Most of it has been kind of talking about the coaching, but how do we get past this? Is there a way to get past this?
I mean, if you're new to being an Auburn fan, I don't know what you do. If you're, I mean, if you're used to it, then you probably, like I said, you kind of become numb to it. But if are you talking about emotionally, or are you talking about how does actually Auburn do it?
I think the players. I mean, us emotionally, again, like I'm at a spot of I go into these games with little to no confidence that we'll win, and if we do something good, then I am impressed. That's kind of where I'm at. But let's talk about the players. How do they move past this?
Yeah, like I said, I've never been a player, not in a football, and I did play soccer and stuff. I feel like they probably are able to move on better than fans. Just even from just by default, they have to show up the next day and start practicing.
Yep.
So I think anytime you get your mind off something, all right, you literally have to forget about Georgia. We are now game planning for Ole Miss.
Yep.
And, they hear the noise and everything. I think the best thing for players to do, and they probably do this to some degree, you can't get on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just can't do it. If you want to move past something, because that's just not a good place really for anybody to be. But definitely, when people are talking directly about you.
Right.
So, I think the players will do a fine job of moving on. That's the nature of the business, man. They have to flush it down and start prepping for Ole Miss.
Right. I mean, I'm sure even in high school, you have that same pressure. If you didn't have a good game, you're going to see some tweets or posts of, this person thought you did a terrible job, and like that stuff gets inside your head. And really, you just got to focus on what's the task ahead of you.
I hate giving any Georgia player credit, but Stetson Bennett, he had a terrible SEC championship game, and they asked him, like, how are you going to handle this? He's like, well, he didn't even have a social media account. He said he was saying he had a flip phone. He's like, I don't even have and really that's a little extreme, but I mean, good for him, man. I mean, if you're, you can't be listening to that outside noise.
Yeah.
There's no way you can do your job if you're listening to that outside noise.
Right.
And the fans do not know. If you're listening to this right now, players, y'all know more than we do, and y'all are giving it everything you got. And just, don't listen to fans. You do the best you can. And that's all you can do, man.
Yeah. And being a previous player, when I knew I did bad, I already knew I did bad. You didn't have to,
you don't have
read
to
the tabloids to see, I did bad. So, like, really, like, what is the player going to do? They're going to, put your head down. Hey, I did this play wrong. What am I going to do right the next time? And that's all you can do.
You got 2 options. You can quit, or you can get back up and try to go do better next time.
Right.
And, most people aren't going to quit, which is good. So, you get back up and you try it again. That's all you can do.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Jared, how can people stay in touch with you?
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter at AJAY, JAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.